One quiet truth changes everything about the way people see empaths, and most never realize it until it is far too late. The greatest mistake you can make is believing that the person who forgives the most is also the person who can be hurt forever without consequences. That belief has destroyed countless relationships because an empath rarely fights to prove their worth. They stay patient. They stay understanding. They keep giving chances long after others would have walked away. From the outside, this looks like weakness. It looks like they lack confidence. It looks like they will always come back. But beneath that calm surface, another story is unfolding. Every ignored feeling, every broken promise, every moment of disrespect quietly leaves a mark. Unlike loud anger, these emotional wounds do not appear all at once. They gather in silence until one day the person everyone thought would never leave simply disappears from the relationship. Emotionally first and physically later. That moment surprises almost everyone because the final goodbye is rarely caused by one mistake. It is the result of many invisible moments that slowly change the way an empath sees the people around them. The consequences are far more powerful than revenge because they are permanent. Once an empath truly reaches that point, the relationship is often impossible to return to what it once was. This is the psychological transformation very few people ever witness until it is happening right in front of them. Many people misunderstand what an empath actually is. They assume an empath is simply someone who cries easily or feels emotions more deeply than everyone else. The reality is much more complex. An empath naturally notices emotional patterns that others miss. They sense tension before words are spoken. They recognize pain hidden behind smiles. They often understand people even when those people struggle to understand themselves. This ability allows them to create deep connections, but it also makes them vulnerable to carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs to carry. Because they genuinely care, they often believe every relationship deserves another chance. They search for explanations instead of blame. They look for healing instead of conflict. They hope people can change if they are loved enough. Unfortunately, this hope is often mistaken for endless tolerance. Kindness becomes confused with weakness. Patience becomes confused with permission. Forgiveness becomes confused with acceptance of repeated disrespect. These misunderstandings create a dangerous cycle where the empath continues giving while others continue taking, believing there will never be a limit. The truth is that every empath has a breaking point, and it rarely arrives the way people expect. It does not begin with shouting or dramatic arguments. It begins with quiet emotional exhaustion. It begins when trust slowly becomes uncertainty, when hope starts turning into disappointment, and when the effort to save the relationship becomes heavier than the relationship itself. That hidden process changes the mind, the heart, and even the way an empath responds to the world. In this video, you will discover why empaths stay longer than most people, why emotional pain builds silently instead of loudly, what finally pushes them beyond their limit, and why the person who once forgave everything can suddenly become impossible to reach. You will also learn why many people only recognize an empath's true value after they have emotionally detached, why silence is often stronger than arguments, and why the final consequence of breaking an empath is not anger but a complete shift in who they become. Some of these psychological changes are rarely discussed, yet they explain why so many relationships end with confusion, regret, and unanswered questions. By the end of this video, you will understand the hidden stages of an empath's transformation, the warning signs most people ignore, and the lasting lessons that can protect any relationship built on trust and respect. Welcome to the channel. If you're interested in understanding human behavior, emotional intelligence, and the hidden psychology behind relationships, make sure to subscribe and join us for more deep insights that reveal what most people never notice until it is too late. There is a reason empaths seem to endure pain longer than almost anyone else, and it has very little to do with weakness. Their strength often appears in a form that people fail to recognize. Instead of reacting to every disappointment, they try to understand it. Instead of assuming the worst, they search for reasons behind another person's behavior. When someone speaks harshly, an empath often wonders what pain caused those words instead of immediately becoming angry. When promises are broken, they do not rush to end the relationship. They hope there is an explanation they have not yet heard. This deep compassion becomes one of their greatest gifts, but it can also become one of their greatest burdens. While many people protect themselves after the first warning sign, empaths continue believing that kindness can heal what anger cannot. They naturally focus on another person's struggles before paying attention to their own emotional wounds. This is why they stay in difficult friendships, painful family situations, and unhealthy relationships much longer than most people would. They believe people are capable of change. They believe everyone deserves another chance. They believe love, patience, and understanding can help someone become a better person. Sometimes this belief is true, but many times it keeps them trapped in situations that slowly drain their emotional energy. The people around them may see endless patience, but inside, the empath is carrying disappointment after disappointment, without letting anyone see how heavy that weight has become. One of the strongest forces driving an empath is emotional responsibility. They often feel responsible for the emotional atmosphere around them. If someone close to them is upset, they immediately wonder if they could have done something differently. If an argument happens, they replay every conversation in their mind, searching for mistakes they might have made. Even when the problem clearly started with someone else, they still ask themselves difficult questions. Could they have listened better? Could they have been more patient? Could they have explained themselves differently? This constant self-examination makes them incredibly thoughtful, but it also makes them vulnerable to carrying blame that does not belong to them. Instead of asking why someone repeatedly hurts them, they ask why they were unable to stop the hurt from happening. Instead of demanding accountability from others, they demand perfection from themselves. Over time, this habit creates a dangerous imbalance because every relationship requires responsibility from both people, yet the empath slowly begins carrying the emotional weight for everyone involved. They apologize to restore peace even when they were not the one who caused the conflict. They comfort the very people who wounded them because seeing another person in pain becomes unbearable. This cycle feels normal to them because helping others has always been part of who they are. Another reason empaths endure so much is their deep desire to fix relationships instead of replacing them. Many people walk away after repeated conflict because they believe the connection has reached its limit. Empaths often think differently. They see broken trust as something that can be repaired. They see misunderstandings as opportunities for deeper communication. They believe that honest conversations can solve almost any problem if both people are willing to try. Because of this belief, they invest enormous amounts of emotional energy into saving relationships that others would have already left behind. They continue reaching out after silence. They continue forgiving after disappointment. They continue hoping after heartbreak. Every new chance they give is based on the belief that this time things will finally change. Sometimes they ignore clear warning signs because they remember the person's good qualities more than their harmful actions. They separate who someone is from what someone does, convincing themselves that the hurtful behavior is only temporary. This hope allows toxic situations to continue far longer than they should, because the empath keeps waiting for the caring version of the other person to return. As this pattern continues, another habit quietly develops. Empaths often blame themselves before blaming anyone else. This happens almost automatically. When trust begins to weaken, they question their own actions first. When affection starts disappearing, they wonder if they became difficult to love. When communication fades, they assume they must have failed somehow. Their mind searches for personal mistakes because accepting that someone willingly chose to hurt them feels much more painful. Believing they can improve themselves creates the comforting illusion that they still have control over the relationship. If they caused the problem, perhaps they can also solve it. Unfortunately, this way of thinking allows repeated mistreatment to continue. Instead of recognizing patterns of manipulation, disrespect, or emotional neglect, they become busy correcting flaws that may not even exist. They become more patient, more forgiving, more understanding, while the unhealthy behavior around them remains exactly the same. This creates an unhealthy cycle that becomes stronger every time it repeats. The empath gives another chance. The other person behaves well for a short period. Hope returns. Then the same hurtful behavior appears again. Another apology follows. Another promise is made. Another opportunity is given. Months or even years can pass inside this repeating pattern. Each cycle becomes harder to escape because emotional investment keeps growing. The empath remembers every good memory and believes those moments represent the person's true character. They convince themselves that the painful moments are only temporary setbacks. Meanwhile, the damage continues growing beneath the surface. Their confidence slowly weakens. Their emotional energy slowly fades. Their sense of security slowly disappears. Yet they continue trying because giving up feels like abandoning someone they still care about. Toxic people often misunderstand this completely. They mistake compassion for permission. They mistake forgiveness for acceptance. They mistake patience for weakness. Because the empath rarely reacts with immediate anger, unhealthy people begin believing there will never be real consequences for their actions. They assume another apology will always fix everything. They believe another excuse will erase another broken promise. Over time, respect quietly disappears because there are no visible boundaries stopping the harmful behavior. Every act of forgiveness convinces the toxic person they can push even further next time. They stop appreciating kindness because they begin expecting it. They stop valuing loyalty because they assume it will never disappear. They become comfortable taking emotional support without giving the same care in return. They fail to notice that every act of disrespect is slowly filling an invisible container inside the empath, one that cannot hold endless pain forever. But patience is never endless. The greatest emotional injuries are rarely dramatic enough for other people to notice. Most emotional damage happens quietly, hidden beneath everyday conversations and ordinary routines. An empath may still smile, still help others, still fulfill responsibilities, while carrying emotional wounds that nobody else can see. This invisible damage grows through hundreds of small disappointments, rather than one unforgettable event. A forgotten promise here. A careless comment there. Feeling ignored during important moments. Feeling unheard after expressing pain. Feeling valued only when someone needs support, but forgotten when support is needed in return. None of these moments seem powerful by themselves, but together they slowly reshape the emotional world of the empath. Every disappointment leaves behind a memory that the nervous system quietly stores. Every experience teaches the mind whether it is safe to trust again. As these disappointments continue collecting, hope begins losing its strength. Emotional exhaustion develops gradually because the empath keeps giving long after their emotional resources begin running low. They continue encouraging others while secretly wishing someone would notice they also need encouragement. They continue listening while feeling increasingly unheard. They continue carrying emotional burdens until even simple conversations start feeling heavy. Their body also begins responding to this constant pressure. Stress remains active for longer periods. Rest becomes less refreshing. Small problems feel bigger because the nervous system has spent so much time in survival mode. Emotional invalidation adds even more pressure. When their feelings are dismissed, ignored, laughed at, or treated as an overreaction, they begin questioning their own emotional reality. Instead of feeling understood, they feel alone. Instead of feeling safe enough to express themselves honestly, they begin hiding more of what they truly feel. The outside world still sees a patient and caring person, but inside, emotional fatigue continues growing stronger every day. This is one reason empaths rarely explode immediately. Their first response is almost always understanding instead of confrontation. They absorb disappointment instead of releasing it. They forgive instead of fighting. They remain silent instead of creating conflict. Many people mistake this silence as proof that nothing is wrong, but silence often means the empath is processing far more than anyone realizes. They are thinking deeply. They are comparing actions with promises. They are noticing patterns that others ignore. Every painful experience becomes another piece of evidence shaping their final decision. Because they do not react dramatically, the people hurting them often believe everything has been forgiven. They never realize the empath is quietly reaching the limits of what their heart can carry. Silent suffering changes personality in ways that are difficult to notice at first. The empath laughs less often. They become quieter during conversations. They stop sharing personal thoughts as openly as before. Their excitement fades. Their trust becomes more cautious. They no longer expect the same kindness they once believed existed in everyone. This transformation is not caused by becoming cruel. It is caused by learning painful lessons through repeated experience. The warmth remains inside them, but it is no longer given freely to everyone who asks for it. Eventually, a psychological tipping point arrives. It is not marked by one dramatic argument or one unforgettable betrayal. It is the moment when the accumulated weight of countless disappointments becomes heavier than the hope that things will improve. Trust has been damaged too many times. Respect has been ignored too often. Emotional neglect has lasted too long. One final event may appear to be the reason everything ends, but it is usually only the spark that reaches years of emotional exhaustion waiting beneath the surface. The real cause has been building quietly all along. The empath suddenly realizes they are no longer fighting for a relationship but fighting against a pattern that never changes. That realization changes everything. From that moment, emotional availability begins disappearing. They stop reaching out first. They stop asking for reassurance. They stop believing another conversation will create another outcome. The energy that once went into saving the relationship quietly turns inward. This change surprises the people around them because it happens without loud announcements. The empath who once explained every feeling suddenly has very little left to say. This is emotional burnout. After trying countless times to communicate honestly, after repeating the same needs, after giving endless chances, conversations begin feeling meaningless. Words lose their power because experience has taught them that promises without consistent action change nothing. Hope slowly fades. not because they want it to disappear, but because reality has replaced expectation too many times. Emotional detachment does not happen overnight. It develops one disappointment at a time, until protecting their own peace becomes more important than protecting a relationship that no longer protects them. Their silence is often misunderstood as punishment, but in truth it is self-protection. They are no longer trying to make someone feel guilty. They are simply too emotionally exhausted to keep carrying a weight that was never meant to belong to one person alone. Ironically, this quiet distance often confuses the very people who caused it. They wonder why the empath suddenly changed, never realizing the change began long before the silence ever appeared. What surprises most people is that an empath does not remain emotionally broken forever. The version of them that carried everyone's pain, ignored every warning sign, and believed love alone could repair every relationship slowly begins to disappear. In its place, a different person starts to emerge. This transformation is not loud or dramatic. It happens quietly, often without anyone noticing until the change is complete. The empath begins rebuilding their identity, not around pleasing other people, but around protecting their own emotional well-being. For a long time, much of their identity may have been connected to helping, comforting, fixing, and understanding everyone around them. They measured their value by how much they could give. They believed being needed meant being loved. But after enough emotional pain, they begin asking a different question. Instead of asking, "How can I save this relationship?" they begin asking, "Why am I always sacrificing myself to save it?" That single question changes everything. It shifts their attention from constantly looking outward to finally looking inward. They begin discovering parts of themselves that were buried beneath years of emotional responsibility. They reconnect with interests they abandoned, dreams they delayed, and peace they forgot was possible. They slowly remember that they existed long before they started carrying the emotional weight of everyone else. One of the biggest changes appears in the way they create boundaries. In the past, saying no often filled them with guilt. They worried that refusing someone would make them seem selfish or uncaring. They believed that always being available was proof of love. Now they understand something different. They realize that boundaries do not push healthy people away. They reveal who respects them and who only valued unlimited access to their kindness. They stop feeling guilty for protecting their time. They stop apologizing for needing rest. They stop explaining every decision in the hope that everyone will approve. Their boundaries become simple, calm, and consistent. If someone repeatedly disrespects them, they no longer spend months trying to convince that person to change. They simply reduce access to their life. This does not come from bitterness. It comes from experience. They have learned that protecting their peace is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of survival. At the same time, their emotional awareness becomes even stronger. They begin recognizing unhealthy patterns much earlier than before. The small warning signs they once ignored now become impossible to overlook. They notice inconsistency between words and actions. They recognize manipulation hidden behind fake kindness. They understand the difference between someone making an honest mistake and someone repeating harmful behavior without any intention of changing. This awareness allows them to make decisions based on patterns instead of promises. They stop believing potential is more important than reality. They stop falling in love with who someone could become and begin paying attention to who that person consistently chooses to be. This simple shift protects them from repeating painful cycles that once felt impossible to escape. Their empathy also changes, but it never disappears. Many people believe that a hurt empath becomes cold, uncaring, or emotionally closed forever. That is not what usually happens. Their empathy simply becomes more selective. Before, they gave their emotional energy freely, believing everyone deserved unlimited understanding. Now they understand that empathy without boundaries often becomes self-destruction. They continue caring deeply, but they become careful about where that care is invested. They no longer spend endless nights trying to rescue people who refuse to help themselves. They stop confusing support with sacrifice. They realize that constantly saving others while abandoning themselves was never true compassion, it was imbalance. Their kindness becomes guided by wisdom instead of guilt. They still help those who genuinely value it, but they no longer pour endless energy into people who repeatedly misuse their trust. Another remarkable transformation happens inside their need for validation. Earlier in life, appreciation from others often meant everything. A simple thank you could erase weeks of exhaustion. Feeling needed gave them purpose. Being loved gave them direction. But after repeated disappointment, they slowly stopped depending on external approval to define their worth. They realized that many people happily accept kindness without ever appreciating the person offering it. Waiting for recognition becomes exhausting because not everyone notices silent sacrifices. Instead of searching for proof that they matter, they begin creating that certainty within themselves. Their confidence grows quietly. They no longer need constant reassurance that they are enough. They stop chasing acceptance from people who repeatedly made them question their value. They become comfortable walking away from relationships where respect is missing because they no longer confuse attention with love. This confidence is different from pride or arrogance. It is peaceful. It does not demand admiration. It simply refuses to settle for disrespect. People around them often misunderstand this change. The empath who once answered every message immediately now takes time for themselves. The person who once solved everyone's problems now says they cannot help right now. The friend who once explained every feeling now simply smiles and changes the subject. To those who benefited from the old version of the empath, this calm behavior feels cold. They wonder why the empath has become distant. They assume they have stopped caring. The truth is much deeper. The empath still cares, but they have stopped abandoning themselves to prove it. Their calmness comes from emotional balance, not emotional emptiness. They have learned that constantly giving until nothing remains does not create healthy relationships. It creates dependency. Their silence is not punishment. Their distance is not cruelty. Their peace is the result of finally understanding their own worth. The biggest change is not anger. It is clarity. They begin seeing relationships exactly as they are instead of how they hoped they would become. They stop making excuses for repeated disrespect. They stop believing that love automatically creates change. They understand that trust is built through consistent actions, not emotional promises. This clarity removes confusion that once kept them trapped. Decisions become easier because they no longer ignore reality in favor of hope. They still believe people can change, but they also understand that change must come from genuine effort, not endless chances. Ironically, this is often the moment when other people begin realizing what they have lost. While the empath was always present, their emotional support seemed ordinary. Their patience became expected. Their loyalty became invisible because it was always there. Human nature has a habit of noticing value most clearly after it disappears. This delayed realization explains why so many people regret losing an empath only after the relationship has already changed beyond repair. The encouraging messages are gone. The thoughtful check-ins disappear. The quiet understanding that once made difficult days easier is suddenly missing. At first the absence feels small, but as time passes, its true weight becomes impossible to ignore. Psychologists often describe this tendency as noticing absence more clearly than presence. When something reliable exists every day, the human mind adapts to it. It becomes part of normal life. The empath's consistency slowly becomes invisible because it is expected rather than appreciated. Only after that consistency disappears does the mind recognize how much emotional stability it was providing. People begin remembering the countless small acts of kindness they never acknowledged. They remember who stayed during difficult times, who listened without judgment, who believed in them when others walked away. Those memories often arrive too late because the empath has already reached a place of emotional peace without them. This is why apologies frequently come after emotional detachment has already happened. The person who caused the pain finally notices the silence, the distance, and the absence of emotional availability. They begin making promises they once refused to make. They suddenly offer the attention the empath had been asking for all along. They express regret with genuine emotion because they are finally experiencing the consequences of their own actions. Unfortunately, timing matters. Once trust has been damaged repeatedly over a long period, rebuilding it becomes one of the hardest emotional tasks any relationship can face. Trust is not restored by one apology because trust was never destroyed by one mistake. It was weakened through repeated experiences. Every broken promise left a mark. Every ignored feeling created another crack. Repairing years of emotional damage requires far more than words, and by this stage, the empath has often accepted that continuing to wait for change would only reopen old wounds. Many people expect revenge at this point, but healthy empaths rarely choose that path. They understand that revenge keeps emotional energy connected to the very pain they are trying to leave behind. Seeking revenge means allowing past hurt to continue controlling present decisions. Healing requires something entirely different. It requires emotional closure. Closure does not always mean receiving perfect answers or hearing the apology you hoped for. Sometimes closure simply means accepting reality exactly as it is. It means understanding that not every relationship will become what you once believed it could be. Acceptance is painful because it asks you to release hope before you are emotionally ready, but it also creates freedom. The empath gradually stops asking why everything happened. They stop replaying old conversations searching for different endings. They stop carrying emotional burdens that belong to someone else. Instead of investing energy in proving who was right or wrong, they invest that energy in rebuilding themselves. Moving on becomes their greatest response. Not because they stopped caring, but because they finally started caring for themselves as much as they cared for everyone else. This quiet decision often feels more painful to those left behind than any argument ever could. Conflict still creates connection because two people remain emotionally engaged. Indifference removes that connection completely. When the empath no longer argues, no longer pleads, and no longer seeks explanations, the other person realizes that the emotional bond they depended on has truly changed. Healing should never be mistaken for punishment. The empath is not trying to create guilt. They are simply refusing to remain inside a cycle that repeatedly destroyed their peace. Every meaningful relationship ultimately rests on one foundation stronger than attraction, excitement, or even love. That foundation is trust. Without trust, every misunderstanding grows larger, every promise becomes uncertain, every act of kindness begins carrying hidden doubt. Trust allows vulnerability to exist without fear. It allows honesty to replace guessing. It allows both people to feel emotionally safe enough to be completely themselves. This safety cannot exist when only one person is carrying the relationship. Emotional reciprocity is what keeps trust alive. Both people must listen. Both people must apologize when necessary. Both people must protect the emotional well-being of the other. Kindness should never be treated as an unlimited resource that can be used without appreciation. The moment kindness is mistaken for weakness, respect begins disappearing. Empathy is one of the greatest strengths a person can possess, but it should never become permission for exploitation. Healthy boundaries protect everyone involved because they create relationships built on mutual respect instead of emotional imbalance. The strongest people are often not the loudest, the toughest, or the most dramatic. Very often true emotional strength is quiet. It appears in the person who chooses peace over chaos, wisdom over revenge, and self-respect over endless sacrifice, even when nobody else fully understands the silent journey that brought them there. As we reach the end of this journey, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Empaths do not tolerate pain because they are weak. They tolerate it because they believe people can change, relationships can heal, and kindness is always worth choosing. They give more chances than most people ever would because their first instinct is understanding, not judgment. But every ignored feeling, every broken promise, and every act of disrespect leaves a quiet mark. Emotional pain rarely arrives all at once. It builds slowly, hidden beneath everyday conversations and ordinary moments, until the weight becomes too heavy to carry. That is why an empath's breaking point is almost never caused by one single event. It is the result of countless moments that slowly change the way they saw the relationship. When they finally become silent, that silence is not a game, and it is not a way to punish anyone. It is often the final step of protecting a heart that has spent far too long fighting battles alone. Emotional detachment is not revenge. It is what happens when someone has given everything they had and finally realizes they must also save themselves. Perhaps the greatest lesson in all of this is that people often recognize the value of an empath only after that value is gone. The daily encouragement, the endless patience, the quiet loyalty, and the constant emotional support become visible only when they disappear. By then, apologies may be sincere, but trust has already been weakened by too many repeated disappointments. Trust is one of the easiest things to protect and one of the hardest things to rebuild. A single moment can damage what took years to create, and no amount of regret can erase the emotional memories left behind. That is why every relationship deserves honesty, respect, appreciation, and consistent effort before it reaches the point where healing becomes impossible together. The most unforgettable thing about a healed empath is not anger, revenge, or bitterness. It is peace. It is the quiet confidence that replaces constant self-doubt. It is the strength to stop chasing people who no longer choose them. It is the courage to stop explaining their worth to those who never wanted to see it. Once an empath truly heals, they no longer carry relationships by themselves. They no longer sacrifice their well-being just to keep someone else comfortable. They continue loving deeply, but they also learn that real love never asks one person to lose themselves so another can stay the same. Sometimes the most brutal consequence is not what an empath does after being broken. It is the realization that they finally found the strength to walk away and never needed to look back. Now we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced this kind of transformation, or have you seen someone close to you go through it? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is silently facing the same journey. If this video gave you a new perspective, or helped you understand yourself or someone you care about, Please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel for more deep insights into psychology, emotional intelligence, human behavior, and relationships. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content that explores the hidden patterns most people never notice. Until next time, remember this: the strongest hearts are not the ones that never break, but the ones that learn when to stop bleeding for people who never noticed the wound.